Lucas died in winter. It was euthanasia. He didn't inform me and went to Sweden alone. On the night before he left, with his bloodshot eyes, he held me down on the bed and made love to me again and again. I couldn't bear it and scolded him. My round fingertips left several bloodstains on his back. He didn't even feel the pain and desperately wanted to merge with me. Early the next morning, he gently kissed my forehead. "Andrew, I'm leaving." I thought he was going to work and waved my hand impatiently. "Get out of here quickly." Then 2 days later, the lawyer came back with his will. Lucas had cancer, but I didn't notice it at all. The lawyer handed me the will. I picked up the short will and read it over and over again. I almost read it through, but didn't find anything special. There was just one line on it. All of Lucas's estate goes to Andrew. "Is there nothing else?" I asked casually. The lawyer shook his head but still added a sentence. "Mr. Lucas wants to be buried in Sweden." To be buried in Sweden, I suddenly wanted to laugh. We had been together for 5 years, but Lucas and I didn't talk much. Most of our interactions were in bed. However, he never listened to me. When I asked him to stop, he ignored me. When I told him to get out, he kept silent. Why was he so obedient this time? I told him to die outside, and he really died outside. "Don't tell me about this." I slowly threw the will on the table. Let him die wherever he wants. After going bankrupt, suddenly getting a fortune in inheritance made me feel like it wasn't real. It was so unreal that I always felt that Lucas was hiding in the dark, observing my reaction. So I didn't dare to show how happy I was. If he knew I was so happy after his death, I was really afraid that he would suddenly pop up from somewhere and then hold me down on the bed and make love to me without saying a word. This feeling didn't go away until I got on the plane to Sweden and saw Lucas's body in the church. It was a very simple funeral. No one attended except me, who inherited all his estate. Lucas, lying in the black coffin, had a gentle and peaceful face. I leaned over the coffin to check his breath and felt his chest. There was no breath, no heartbeat. But I didn't let my guard down. I grabbed his face and tugged hard. It was real. Lucas was really dead. "I told you that one shouldn't do wrong things." I patted his face and laughed heartily. "But considering you left me all your inheritance, I'll reluctantly watch you be buried properly." It was deep winter at this time, and Sweden had just had a heavy snowfall. The thick layer of snow creaked under my feet. I'm very afraid of the cold, so I wrapped myself up tightly, leaving only my eyes exposed as I watched the workers place the coffin in the dug-out pit. The coffin was lowered and then the soil was filled in. After everything was done, the workers who had been paid left in groups, leaving only me and a freshly filled dark, brown soil pit. I stood there blankly looking at this dark, brown land. It was so cold that my mind seemed to stop working and I forgot what I was doing. It wasn't until fine snow started to fall again from the sky, covering the exposed land with a thin layer of snow, that I suddenly came to my senses. It's so cold. It's so cold that there's ice on my eyelashes. I lowered my eyes and blew on my frozen hands, then turned around and left. I still have a lot of things to do. After returning to my country, I was extremely busy. I was busy with the inheritance transfer and managing the company. Those busy days made me fall asleep as soon as my head hit the pillow. I didn't even need sleeping pills. But after everything was done, I could finally have a few peaceful days. I went to bed at 10 o'clock but just couldn't fall asleep. Could it be that I'm not used to sleeping alone? I rolled my dry eyes and thought I was really useless. When sleeping with someone, I found Lucas annoying, but now I'm not used to sleeping alone. Unable to fall asleep, I sat up and poured out all the sleeping pills on the bedside table. I counted and there were still 10 left. I'm not trying to commit out of love. It's just that the house is too big and I'm too bored. I could only pick at those white pills one by one. Finally, I chose 2 that looked good and stuffed the rest back. Then I swallowed them with warm water. Sleepiness came quickly. I closed my eyes unconsciously. When I woke up again, the 18-year-old Lucas was quietly standing in front of me. Realizing that I had reborn, my first reaction was to be so angry that I laughed. After finally waiting for him to die, I didn't expect him to still pester me even after I reborn. The young Lucas stood with his head down. He was much thinner than he would be 10 years later. The loose sky blue school uniform made his figure look even more gaunt. Weak, helpless, and pitiful. It was the first time I saw Lucas like this. I couldn't help but look him up and down in amazement. His class teacher was sitting opposite me, having a talk with me about sponsoring Lucas. Mr. Andrew, student Shin has always been an excellent student in both studies and conduct. What do you think about the sponsorship? Using the phrase excellent in both studies and conduct to describe Lucas? It's really a laughingstock. If he really had a conscience, he should have repaid me without asking for anything in return when I went bankrupt, instead of using it as a bargaining chip to satisfy his own needs. Just thinking about the past made my head ache uncontrollably. Bending my knuckles to press my temples, I asked irritably, "Are there any other candidates?" The class teacher was stunned. He didn't understand why I suddenly changed my mind when we had been talking well at first. But he couldn't figure out the thoughts of a businessman. Lucas could find someone else to sponsor him. He definitely had to protect the rights and interests of other students first. There is also a girl. He took out the girl's information. "Do you need me to call her over for you to take a look?" "No need." I waved my hand. As long as it wasn't Lucas, I didn't care whether the other person was round or flat. Just her. Just like that, I decided on my sponsorship target. Lucas still stood there silently. The talk about him was over, but he didn't show any sign of trying to fight for himself. It was only when he turned to leave that he finally looked up at me one more time. "What are you looking at?" I grumbled to myself, but my heart felt inexplicably stuffy. As if trying to escape something, I quickly left the school. The driver who came to pick me up was my secretary, Daniel. Back then, when I was on the verge of bankruptcy, he accompanied me everywhere to defend my rights. But in the end, I failed and he had to leave the city and return to his rural hometown. Sitting in the familiar car seat, I suddenly got a craving for a cigarette. I rummaged through my whole body but couldn't find a single cigarette. "Do you have any cigarettes?" I asked Daniel. Daniel looked at me strangely. "I don't have any cigarettes." "When did you start smoking, Mr. Andrew?" It was only after his reminder that I suddenly remembered that I hadn't developed a smoking habit 10 years ago. 10 years ago, what a wonderful phrase. Nothing had happened yet and everything could still be changed. My mind was clear. "Daniel, hurry up. Let's go back to the company." After hearing this, Daniel slowly started the car. My meeting with Lucas's homeroom teacher was scheduled for dinner time. Students at the school gate were bustling and blocking our car. We could only move the car slowly along with the flow of people. When we were halfway through, I looked out of the car window and saw a familiar face. 18-year-old Lucas was standing under an eave, munching on a steamed bun with boiled water. There was a steamed bun shop right next to him. Each bun cost 50 cents. The bun wasn't very big. He lowered his eyes and ate it slowly. The hand holding the bun was even whiter than the bun itself. Perhaps my gaze was too intense. Sensing it, he looked up and met my eyes, though there was a car window between us. I could see him, but he couldn't see me. Lucas stared blankly at the dark car window for 2 seconds, then lowered his head and continued to munch on the remaining part of the bun in his hand. He passed away due to gastric cancer. I suddenly felt as if I understood why he got gastric cancer. As the car moved forward, there were fewer and fewer students. Daniel gradually increased the speed. Afraid that I might get impatient, he reported in real time, "After this traffic light, there won't be anyone else. Then we can get back to the company faster." "Turn around," I said softly. "Ha!" Daniel exclaimed in confusion. But seeing my serious face, he didn't ask any more questions. He made a turn and drove back to the original place. Lucas was still there. He had finished his first bun, but he was so hungry that he bought another one. He didn't have much money on him. That bun was supposed to be his breakfast tomorrow. Lucas was always a well-planned person. He never spent tomorrow's budget in advance. But for some reason, he was unusually generous tonight. As a result, he would have to go hungry tomorrow morning. Suddenly, a black Bentley stopped in front of him. Seeing him, Daniel said in surprise, "Mr. Andrew, isn't this the student you're sponsoring?" I didn't explain to Daniel that I wasn't sponsoring Lucas. Instead, I rolled down the car window. "Get in the car," I commanded Lucas coldly. He was stunned for a moment, stuffed the half-eaten bun in his hand into his pocket, opened the car door, and got in. My mother always said that I was too soft-hearted. Being soft-hearted was not good. It was easy to suffer big losses. I just couldn't get rid of this bad habit. That's why I went bankrupt and dragged in Lucas, this opportunistic villain. After saying hello to Lucas's class teacher, I took him to my company. My company produces new energy vehicles. This is not unusual 10 years later, but it was an emerging industry 10 years ago. Back at my familiar office desk, I first ordered a nutritious meal for Lucas and then started working. I haven't worked for 5 years. After going bankrupt, I've been living entirely on the money Lucas earns. Fortunately, my knowledge hasn't faded. Looking at those unfamiliar yet familiar documents, I quickly got into the state and started dealing with them. Lucas sat beside me quietly eating the nutritious meal. There was stir-fried carrots with pork, scrambled eggs with shrimp, and a bowl of corn and spare rib soup. He finished them one by one. When there was only the corn and spare rib soup left, Lucas picked up the bowl and sipped it slowly. His eyes unconsciously fell on me and then quickly retracted. Finally, seeing that I was fully immersed in my work and didn't react, he openly observed me. I have delicate eyebrows, cute little fox-like eyes, a small and pert nose, and full, pink lips. Lucas slowly traced my facial features on the clean table with his index finger and finally stopped at the position of my lips. He added, "They're good to kiss." I didn't finish my work until late at night. Sitting for a long time made me extremely tired, so I stretched my body. I raised my hand to check the time. It was already 11 o'clock. Lucas accompanied me until 11 o'clock. I didn't say why I brought him, and he didn't ask either. A strange kind of tacit understanding developed between us. At this time, Daniel had already got off work. I drove with Lucas in the car. When I opened the passenger side door, Lucas finally said his first words to me today. His voice was very pleasant, with the clear tone of a young boy because of his young age. "My home is at number 168 Jiangxing Road." I knew that place. It was a well-known slum in the city of Jing. I didn't answer him. Silently, I led him back to my villa. After entering the villa, I finally spoke. "I heard you're an orphan?" Lucas nodded. "Fine then." I laughed wickedly. "From now on, follow me. I'm your dad." There was a 6-year age gap between Lucas and me. He was 18 and I was 24, so I asked him to call me Little Dad. If he didn't accept it, I was willing to use some coercive measures. However, to my surprise, Lucas accepted it quickly. He looked at me with calm eyes. "Little Dad, which room will I sleep in?" I touched my nose, feeling a bit frustrated. I thought I'd be like a bully, gradually breaking the pride of a cold and elegant scholar, but unexpectedly, Lucas was someone who could bend and stretch. How boring. I casually pointed to a room that was extremely far from mine. "You'll sleep there. And don't bother me if it's not necessary." Lucas nodded obediently. It was already very late. After washing up, I prepared to go to bed. Although it was 10 years ago, my old insomnia problem flared up again. I tossed and turned but just couldn't fall asleep. I thought of sleeping pills. I reached out to fumble on the bedside table, planning to chew 2 pills raw. I groped for a long time but didn't find the familiar small medicine bottle. It turned out that I didn't have insomnia 10 years ago either. I supported my forehead and smiled bitterly. The feeling of lying awake until dawn in a silent night is not pleasant. But as soon as I close my eyes, I always think about being deceived and going bankrupt, being bullied by Lucas on the bed, and the inheritance Lucas left me that I haven't had time to spend yet, which is much more money than I have now. Thinking of this, I can't fall asleep even more. I was so angry that I picked up the pillow, put on my slippers, and walked to Lucas' room. The light in his room was already off. I didn't care if he was awake or not and turned on the light with a snap. "Get up," I ordered him arrogantly. Lucas wasn't asleep yet and slowly got up from the bed. "What's wrong?" The boy's voice was gentle. He still wasn't angry. 18-year-old Lucas had such a good temper that he was like a capybara, which made me inexplicably a bit guilty. But I only felt guilty for 0.01 seconds. Even if Lucas hasn't done anything now, he has to atone for his future. So I justifiably laid down on his bed and stuffed a book into his hand. "I want to sleep. Tell me a story." Lucas took the complete collection of fairy tales in a hurry. This book was very thick and large, with burrs on the edges. The heavy traces of years of use were enough to show how much I doted on this book. "Do you like this book?" Lucas was a bit surprised. "How come I? Why do you ask so many questions? Just read it." The rest of his words were very soft and I didn't hear clearly, and I was too lazy to ask. After all, it's not something to be proud of that an adult's favorite bedtime reading is a complete collection of fairy tales. My willfulness made Lucas burst out laughing. He didn't dwell on it anymore. He turned off the big light, turned on a dim bedside lamp, and dragged a stool to sit beside the bed. "Are you ready to go to sleep?" "Humph." I snorted softly. "Then I'll start reading from the first story. Once upon a time, there was a big bad wolf in the forest." The clear voice of the young man had a special magic that made my eyelids heavier and heavier. Because I was listening to the story wholeheartedly, those annoying things didn't intrude inappropriately. But when I was about to fall asleep, the inexplicable anxiety in my heart grew bigger and bigger. "Lucas," I murmured unconsciously. "I'm here." After getting an affirmative reply, I fell into a deep sleep the next second. Lucas' voice as he told the story gradually faded away. Looking at my peaceful sleeping face, he closed the book and leaned over to place a gentle kiss on my forehead. "Good night, Andrew. Have sweet dreams." I seemed to have a nightmare and woke up sweating profusely the next day. I touched the corner of my eye. The tears there hadn't completely fallen yet, and it felt wet to the touch. It was something I was afraid would happen, but I forgot the content of the dream. I sat up and looked around. I didn't know what time it was. The room was very dark. I instantly felt a bit panicked. Have I been reborn? Maybe not. It was still a month after Lucas' death, 10 years later. I don't know if my fear was because Lucas died 10 years later or because I couldn't send the person who bankrupted me to prison. I can't tell. It was just very cold around me. There was no one else in the bed, just me all alone. Just like that winter after the bankruptcy, that winter after Lucas' death, the room was cold and there was only me all alone. But I clearly went into Lucas' room last night. Could it be that last night was just a dream I had? No, it can't be. Lucas. I shouted desperately. Are you there? I'm here. A reassuring response came from the darkness. Lucas turned on the bedside lamp and the dim yellow light shone on his handsome eyebrows and eyes. I've always been here. I let out a sigh of relief. The young man in front of me was still sitting on that uncomfortable-looking bench. His bright eyes were looking at me, but there were faint dark circles under his eyes. Obviously, the boy hadn't had a good rest. My throat was a bit dry. Why don't you sleep in the bed? Lucas shrugged indifferently. The bed is too small. I'm afraid I'll disturb your rest. I took a look at the bed I was lying on. This was a single bed, but its width was barely enough for two men to lie down. Due to long-term lack of nutrition, Lucas hadn't fully grown up yet. Lying down with me wouldn't affect me much. I felt a bit complicated. You don't have to do this. From now on, after I fall asleep, you can come to bed and sleep with me. Can I sleep with you? Lucas asked seriously. I answered seriously. Yes. Actually, there were still many rooms in this villa. I didn't mention it. Maybe I also needed someone to accompany me to sleep. After dropping Lucas off at school, I turned around and went to the company. As the season was approaching winter, the nights were getting longer. At 6 or 7 o'clock, the sky was hazy and the streetlights hadn't gone out yet. I was driving alone on the empty road. It wasn't much different from me rushing between home and Lucas's company 10 years later, but there was an inexplicable heavy force in my heart which made the current loneliness become peaceful and serene. When I arrived at the company, there were only a few scattered employees. I strolled through the workspace to my office. This company doesn't belong to me. It belongs to my father. After he and my mother died in a car accident, the company was left to me. That was the first inheritance I received in my life. Thinking of this, I couldn't help but smile bitterly. Maybe a witch who wasn't invited cast a curse on me when I was born. Otherwise, why do I always inherit inheritances? When my parents passed away, I was only 20 years old. My uncle managed the company for me for 2 years. After I took over, he went to manage the branch company. My uncle is my only relative. My parents trusted him very much, and so do I. So I was so caught off guard after being betrayed by him. There was a flaw in the production of the branch company managed by him. In order to amass wealth, he used cheap materials and produced hundreds of thousands of defective products over the years, which flowed into the market. These defective products were like a time bomb. As expected, after some time, the incidents of spontaneous combustion of the cars of my company's brand broke out across the board. In this era when the speed of information circulation was not very fast, this incident quickly spread throughout the streets and alleys. My remedial measures were in vain. Court summons filled my mailbox one after another. As if things weren't bad enough, the core documents of my company were also stolen, and the person who stole them sold them to a rival company at a high price. I went bankrupt completely and was burdened with tens of millions of debts after the liquidation. I'm not a very responsible person. I can't bear such a great responsibility. I couldn't stand it in the first month after bankruptcy and wanted to die. I took a fruit knife and slit my wrists in the bathtub to commit. But I was really unlucky that day. I was discovered by Daniel and he took me to the hospital for rescue. My life was saved, but I cut too deeply. Whenever it's cloudy or rainy, the pain in my right wrist will strike again, taking me back to the night when I went bankrupt and making my most miserable days even worse. The doctor said I suffered from severe depression and had a weak will to live, so I needed to be closely watched. Daniel took care of me for a few days with red-rimmed eyes. My condition didn't improve, so he gave up and returned to his rural hometown. I don't blame him. Instead, I feel a bit guilty. After all, it was my poor management that made all his efforts in the past few years go to waste. So on the day he left, I went to the store and bought a new fruit knife. But before the bathtub was filled with water, Lucas came. He forcefully took me away and bought the right to control my body with money. Thinking of Lucas, I raised my right hand and took a look. Now it's spotlessly white. I've always wondered why. Lucas likes to kiss the red mark on my wrist after making love. He always acts vigorously and never gives people a chance to catch their breath. But when he exhausts me, he would hold my hand and plant gentle and slow kisses on my wrist. His warm breath on it always brings a slight itch. In those years, my wrist rarely ached, or maybe it did, but I forgot. Could it be that Lucas's kisses have some kind of magic? As soon as this thought popped up, I mercilessly suppressed it. I sneered to myself. What magic could a boy who only kisses and nuzzles have? I really flatter Lucas. I shook my head to get rid of this ridiculous thought. On the first day after my rebirth, I went to see Emma. Emma was introduced to me by my uncle. We should have been in a relationship for a year by now. More than a decade ago, at the right age, I unguardedly accepted her and made her my fiancée. But it was precisely because of my lack of guard that she and my uncle colluded to steal the company's core secrets. On this day after my rebirth, I proposed the idea of cohabitation to her in advance. Emma was very happy and got into my car excitedly. My idea is very simple. It's much easier to keep the enemy under one's own surveillance to guard against hidden arrows than other methods. At this moment, I was fully committed to revenge, so I forgot one of the most important things. Lucas also lived with me. So when I brought Emma back to the villa, Lucas was stunned. Who is she? I inexplicably felt a bit embarrassed. It felt like bringing my current partner to meet my ex. But fortunately, I didn't have any relationship with Lucas 10 years ago. I comforted myself and introduced Emma to Lucas. This is my fiancée, Emma. Fiancée. Lucas pressed his thin lips into a straight line. He had investigated me a long time ago, so he knew about the relationship between me and this fiancée. Of course, he also understood why I brought my fiancée home now. But an inexplicable sense of jealousy still made his face turn cold for a moment. And I was also observing Lucas's reaction. I suspected whether Lucas had also been reborn. After all, if I could be reborn, Lucas naturally could too. And on that night when I had a nightmare, in my half-asleep and half-awake state, I seemed to hear a gentle call, Andrew. No one called me Andrew, only Lucas from 10 years later would call me Andrew. But the young boy's face didn't change much. Maybe there was a change, but I didn't catch it before he quickly put on a calm face. Hello. He politely greeted Emma. Emma held my arm and looked at the strange boy in front of her, puzzled. Andrew, who is he? Introducing Lucas to Emma gave me a headache. If I said Lucas was a student I sponsored, there was no need to bring a sponsored student home. So I honestly said he is my adopted son. Emma was slightly stunned. She wondered why I, only 24 years old, would adopt a son, but she didn't have the habit of asking too many questions. Since he is your adopted son, does that mean I'm his godmother? This sentence made me a bit uncomfortable. I ignored Lucas's reaction and vaguely refused her. We'll talk about this later. Emma nodded understandingly. As my fiancée, Emma naturally had to stay in the same room with me. I'm a very traditional man. I believe that physical intimacy should wait until after marriage. I was like this 10 years ago, and even more so now. I have no such amorous thoughts. While Emma was taking a shower, I was sitting on the downstairs sofa, boredly scrolling through my phone. Suddenly, Lucas came over. Little dad, don't you need me to read you a story anymore? Lucas's words seemed like he was trying too hard to be nice. So I sat up straight and observed him seriously again. His expression was flawless, as if this was just a simple question without any other meaning. Do you know? I said slowly. The thing I hate most in my life is being deceived. Lucas's expression remained unchanged. His face was calm and natural, and his dark, opaque eyes stared at me intently, like a good listener. So I continued. There's a guy who treated me very badly. He deceived me and hid something very important from me. I hate him so much. What do you think I should do? Lucas finally showed a reaction. He pondered this question for 2 seconds and then said, Then make him get out of your sight. I couldn't help but laugh. I thought Lucas was really consistent. 10 years later, he really did get far away. He went all the way to Sweden. Takes me half a day to get there by plane. He really did get far away. I nodded in agreement. But what if he appears beside me again now? Lucas didn't say a word. Maybe this question was really hard to answer. After a long time, he carefully asked, Little dad, what are you going to do? I don't know. I shrugged. That's why I'm asking you, because I don't know. If you don't know either, then forget it. Lucas was silent. This silence lasted until I got up and left without him speaking again. The disappointment in my heart couldn't stop welling up. Actually, I don't understand what I'm trying to prove with my repeated tests. Is there a huge difference between the Lucas 10 years later and the one 10 years ago for me? Even if I confirm that he is the Lucas 10 years later, what do I want to do? Beat him up severely to vent my anger? It's too childish. I shook my head amusingly. Emma will accompany me tonight. Although I may need someone to accompany me, it's not just anyone who will do. When I couldn't fall asleep with my eyes open, I was thinking about why the Lucas 10 years later was buried in Sweden. Maybe he also felt ashamed of me. On the day he came to pick me up, half of the water in the bathtub had already been filled and I was quietly waiting beside it. But before the water was full, I waited for Lucas first. Actually, I didn't have much impression of him at that time. He was just a child I had sponsored, but I had sponsored many children. So when he broke in, I thought he was a debt collector. I closed my eyes, gritted my teeth, and wanted to slash my neck with a knife. He caught the blade with his own hands. He said he would help me pay off the debt as long as I went home with him, and I was tempted. I thought it was a reward for my previous good deeds. Unexpectedly, he had been coveting me for a long time. The moonlight outside the house shone in through the window. I was really busy today. I also forgot to buy sleeping pills. I really couldn't fall asleep. I slowly walked out of the bedroom in my slippers. For some reason, I came to Lucas' room door. I pushed open the door. The moonlight was already very bright, so I didn't turn on the light this time. Lucas looked very peaceful in his sleep. He didn't sleep well last night. I didn't want to disturb his rest today either. I tiptoed to his bedside and sat on the bench where he sat yesterday. Lucas slept very well. I sat here and observed for a long time. He still lay flat without moving around with his hands crossed on his chest. This posture was the same as the one when he was lying in the coffin. After looking at him for a long time, I inexplicably felt flustered. I reached out to feel his breath. His steady and gentle breath sprayed on my fingertips and my panicked heart calmed down a bit. I gently pinched his face and said, "You always scare me." Lucas didn't respond. Maybe he was fast asleep. Then I also took down his hands that were crossed on his chest. This was his right hand. After I took it down, his 5 fingers curled up and showed the palm. There were only 3 clear palm lines on it, and there was no pink scar left by the knife wound on the palm. Everything was spotless, as if all the things that happened to me in those years had vanished into thin air. I couldn't tell whether I was happy or sad. I slowly intertwined my fingers with his along his palm. "Lucas, do you know? I really hate you." I paused for a moment and then continued, "Did you get my consent before leaving all the inheritance to me? Do you know that I've been busy managing your company for a month? I haven't been eating well or sleeping well. I was fuming when I thought of that month. Why didn't you help me? Just because you passed away, so you didn't help me. You're so bad." I knew I was being a bit unreasonable. But Lucas was sleeping and couldn't hear me, so I spoke without restraint. "Did you get my consent before you died? You're not allowed to die without my consent in the future. Do you understand?" Lucas didn't say a word. He still slept quietly without even frowning. "If you don't say a word, I'll take it as your agreement." I smiled happily. The night was thick. After babbling a lot of words, I felt my eyelids fighting. Finally, sleepiness came. I climbed onto Lucas' bed without any psychological burden. "Good night." I slowly closed my eyes. The next day, I woke up in my own bed and Emma was lying beside me. I was in a daze for a long time. Could it be that last night was just another dream of mine? I don't know. I have had too many dreams. Sometimes I can't tell the difference between dreams and reality. It's just that everything yesterday was so real. Could a dream have such a real tactile sensation? I spread out my hands and recalled the feeling of interlocking fingers with Lucas. It was so real that I even had the illusion that the warm touch still remained on them. But only one person knows the truth about this matter. When sending Lucas to school, I hesitated to speak. I wanted to ask but didn't know where to start. If I said that I secretly got up in the middle of the night and ran to his room just to sleep with him, it would sound like I was a pervert. So it was very difficult for me to speak. Until he got out of the car at school, I summoned up my courage and called him to stop. "Lucas?" ? He stood obediently and looked at me calmly. "You?" I hesitated for a moment. "Did you sleep well last night?" "Very well." He nodded and looked at me sincerely. "I haven't slept so soundly for a long time." "Really?" I didn't know what to say when he said that, so I could only force a couple of laughs. "Then study hard." I'll leave first. Goodbye, little dad. I didn't see any problems with Lucas and I didn't want to dwell on it either. I went back to the company and Daniel had already sorted out the mistakes made by my uncle's company. He had already started doing this, but fortunately, large-scale production hadn't begun yet. I called a board meeting and presented the evidence openly. My uncle looked very pale. He didn't know why I suddenly decided to investigate him. After all, in his eyes, I was just a naive kid who valued family ties and was easy to manipulate. Andrew, I have no idea about this. You have to believe me. It must be one of my subordinates who was blinded by greed and did something wrong on impulse. I'll definitely find out who it is. I believe you, I said slowly. My uncle's face lit up. But the fact that something went wrong with your subordinate only proves that you're not good at management. I think it's better to replace the person in charge of the branch company. The shareholders strongly supported this. After all, they were all seasoned veterans. Who didn't know what my uncle was up to? If this incident were exposed, it would cause irreversible damage to the company. My uncle's face instantly darkened when he heard this. Andrew has grown up, he said coldly. It seems that my words don't carry any weight anymore. Then I won't be involved in your company's operations. Yes, I had grown up. In my previous life, some shareholders had explicitly or implicitly reminded me to keep an eye on my uncle. I didn't take it seriously at that time, thinking that my own uncle wouldn't do anything harmful to me. You can't learn from people, but you can learn from events just once. I nodded slightly. That's for the best. Emma learned about this and came to me in tears. Although I was introduced by your uncle, I had no idea about his affairs. Please don't be estranged from me because of this. Don't worry. I won't, I said, patting her hand reassuringly. After all, what she did was the most important thing. With the evidence and the support of the board members, I took drastic measures to strip my uncle of all his power. And I used all the property under his name to cover the losses caused by that batch of defective products. My uncle called to scold me. He said, "Are you trying to drive me to death?" I remained silent. Didn't he push me off the cliff when he did such things 10 years ago? My silence ignited his anger. Andrew, you should remember that even a cornered dog will jump over the wall. If you push someone too far, you need to think about whether you can bear the consequences. After saying that, he hung up the phone. The phone screen turned from dark to bright. I casually threw it on the table and then looked at the computer. On the computer monitoring screen, Emma sneaked into my study furtively. After a while, she started talking on the phone with my uncle. I let out a soft laugh. The consequences I couldn't bear in my previous life are finally going to come back and hit the person who threw them like a boomerang in this life. Emma and my uncle were arrested quickly. Because my uncle was familiar with the branch company, they embezzled the money from the branch company. Then, thinking they had stolen the business secrets, they sold them to a rival company at a high price and planned to flee the country. And I had already set a net at the airport waiting for them to fall into the trap. Their crimes were relatively serious. The rival company was very angry after being deceived. Coupled with the pressure from me and the rival company, they were finally given the maximum penalty. After the judgment came out, the pent-up anger that had been hidden in my heart for several years finally dissipated. I strode out of the court gate. As if to celebrate my rebirth, it started to snow in the sky. This was the first snow of this year. I reached out to catch the falling snowflakes. The cold snowflakes melted in my palm like a tiny tear. I suddenly realized that every major change in my life seemed to happen in winter. Lucas stood beside me holding an umbrella for me. Seeing me lost in thought looking at the snow, he couldn't help but remind me softly. "Little dad, it's cold. Let's go home." Winter is always so strange. It gets cold all of a sudden. I wrapped my woolen overcoat tightly and started talking irrelevantly. "Do you know? It was also snowing such a light snow on the day he left." Lucas pursed his lips and remained silent, but the knuckles of his hand holding the umbrella handle turned white. I didn't care about his reaction. That year, the winter in Sweden was very cold. He stayed in Sweden alone. He was really bad. He knew I was very afraid of the cold, but he couldn't even stay with me. I sniffed. The cold always made my nose run involuntarily. But he was also very kind. He left me a lot of property. You said he knew I couldn't manage the company well, but he dared to hand such a big company to me. Is it a bit? Little dad, it's all over. Lucas suddenly interrupted what I was going to say next. He repeated it again. It's all over. Forget about him. I looked up at his eyebrows carefully. As usual, he looked calm and serene. I really should forget, just like the scar on my right wrist and the scar on Lucas' right palm. The existence of the scars would only leave us with pain, but now they have all disappeared. They have all disappeared. I should look forward. I blinked at Lucas. Don't call me little dad anymore. Andrew, call me Andrew. Lucas felt his throat tighten. He trembled his voice and softly replied with an I looked back at the snowy sky. It's so cold, Lucas. I don't want to spend the winter alone anymore. Lucas lowered his eyes and held my hand. His palm was as warm as ever. He was always gentle and firm. It doesn't matter, Andrew. I'll always be with you. Epilogue, Lucas. I first met Andrew in the head teacher's office. At that time, I was an outstanding student and he sponsored me. That was the first time I saw such a good-looking person. He clearly had a pair of fox-like eyes, but the innocence and clarity in his pupils when he looked at me made him look so cute. The head teacher called him Mr. Andrew, but I saw the business card he handed over. Andrew, I silently repeated these two words in my heart. People are all visual animals. I admit I was attracted by his appearance. In order to see him again, I worked hard to get into the best school in Jing City. I interned at his company, but I was just a low-level intern. There were thousands of employees in Andrew's company. My existence was so insignificant that he couldn't notice me. Realizing this, I quit my job and began to focus on developing my own career. I was 23 years old when Andrew got into trouble and my career was just starting. I happened to be studying abroad those days. When I had a bad premonition, I flew back to the country overnight. But Andrew was gone. He had gone into hiding. Andrew's uncle was extremely ruthless and didn't leave Andrew a single chance. He had no choice but to hide to avoid those who had lost their property and family and wished to tear him to pieces even though it wasn't his fault. I knew Andrew couldn't bear all this. All that awaited him was death, so I searched for him like a mad end those days. Finally, I found him in the bathroom of a shabby house. The bathtub was half filled with water. When he saw me like a frightened fawn, he took a knife and tried to slit his throat. I quickly grabbed the knife. After easily taking the knife from him, I found that he couldn't use his right hand. Only then did I realize that he had already done something stupid once. Fortunately, it was still not too late. I told him that I would help him. He relaxed and let me take him home. It was very difficult to sort out Andrew's mess. There were too many lawsuits and debts. I worked so hard every day that I was completely exhausted and even ignored his strange behavior. It wasn't until he was hospitalized again for taking sleeping pills that I knew he had suffered from severe depression, which was so serious that it had caused physical reactions and he had no reaction to anything in the outside world. The doctor advised me to do something to distract him. I was so anxious that I wanted to cry that day. Sorry, Andrew. I'm late. I did a lot of things, but Andrew always seemed to be in a daze. He even vomited out the antidepressant drugs. That day I kissed him in force, fed him the medicine. He finally showed a reaction. His delicate eyebrows frowned and he weakly resisted my kiss. I was so overjoyed that I cried. It's okay, Andrew. We'll get better. From that day on, I added one more thing to my work, which was to have sex with Andrew passionately. Although he hated having sex, there was also some fun in it and his expression gradually became more vivid. Under such semi-coercion, he finally said his first sentence to me. Get out of here. I looked at him. His eyes were different from when I first saw him. His fox-like eyes were full of hatred. My heart ached, but I ignored him and continued to penetrate while holding his waist. I knew he had an outlet for his emotions, which was to hate me, but I was willing to accept it. We entangled and tortured each other like this for 5 years. Finally, I was diagnosed with advanced gastric cancer. It's fate. I owe Andrew. I made all the arrangements but didn't dare to tell him, afraid that he would worry and afraid of getting an unsatisfactory reaction. I don't want to live on miserably, tortured by illness and looking terrible. I'm also afraid that Andrew will see me in that state. So I chose euthanasia. There are many countries where euthanasia is legal. I randomly chose a city with snow all year round. I know Andrew is afraid of the cold. Don't come to see me, Andrew. Like others, I'll only leave scars on you. But I didn't expect that I could be reborn. I was reborn at the very beginning when I first met Andrew. But what makes me happiest is that Andrew was also reborn. He looked at me coldly with his fox-like eyes. But I was so happy that I wanted to laugh. Andrew can start over. Everything can start over. He can take revenge on those who hurt him by himself. It doesn't matter if he doesn't need me. But Andrew is very kind. He still softened his heart and took me home. I was very excited. Maybe I still have a chance and 18-year-old Lucas still has a chance. Let it be, Andrew. Let's start over. Let's forget those pains that will be buried in winter. Don't be afraid of winter. 18-year-old Lucas will always be with you.